Hey guys, welcome to a video, and today's video is going to be all about the lower body. And we're going to look at how the lower body should move, what its function is, and give you a couple of drills that you can take away and work on to improve your lower body action too. I find a lot of golfers come to me and they're very confused about how the lower body should work in the golf swing. And there's a lot of conflicting advice on the internet as to what to do with the lower body. So by watching this video, you should start to understand what you can do and how it will impact your golf swing, and give you some framework that you can use and apply to help you hit better golf shots. The video is going to be broken down into two parts. Today's video is going to be about the backswing, and part two is going to be more about the downswing and the actions of the lower body there. So the first part of the video, talking about the lower body, is what can the lower body impact in the golf swing? Well, if we look at the function of the golf swing to make good contact, to create power and control the direction, the lower body's primary function is going to be very influential on low point, and it's also going to be very influential on power. Now, strangely, whenever I talk about low point, well, low point heavily impacts direction. So I guess you could say indirectly that the lower body is very significant in the direction that the golf ball goes to. So overall, this lower body kind of matters. It's very important. So what are we trying to do? Well, we are trying to hit that ball first and the ground second. And the lower body is one of the primary drivers of what moves that low point ahead of the ball. Because if you think about your golf swing, when you address that ball at the beginning, you're going to be set up with a golf club behind the golf ball, yet we don't want to hit the ground in this position. We actually want to hit the ground in that position. And the lower body has got a significant impact on where the bottom of the golf swing is. So let's try and build a backswing that doesn't put us in a disadvantage to create good contact golf shots. So starting at the address position, what can you do to give yourself the best chance of using this lower body really well? Well, first of all, I'd start by looking at the feet and have the feet slightly turned out. Now, one of the reasons for this is just anatomically it's better for your body and less likely to create injury, especially to that lead knee. If we think about what we're trying to do in the golf swing, in the follow-through, we're going to be turning these hips at least 90 degrees. Now, when we think of the golf shot, the left foot stays pretty planted throughout most of the golf swing, but the right foot will leave the ground. So if we start, which I often see where both feet are turned pointing towards the target, the left hip and the left knee's got to take a lot of stress when we start turning towards that target. If you want to experiment at home, put the left foot inwards and just do a slight turn towards the target. Feel where you notice that pressure, typically the lead hip, typically the lead knee. Now, if I turn my foot out, this would be really easy, but yeah, we don't see that in the golf swing too much. And part of the reason is that would restrict what we can do in the backswing. So if you start to turn that left foot out somewhere in the region of 25, 30 degrees towards the target, it's going to make it a lot easier in that follow through for you. So just starting at the lower body, left foot, right foot turned out about 25, 30 degrees. The right foot, however, if it was slightly squarer, that wouldn't be too much of a problem because in the through swing, that right leg comes off the ground anyway. And if we think of the hip turn in the backswing, typically these hips are turning roughly around 45 degrees, and 45 degrees turning into that trail leg. It's not too demanding on either the knee or the hip, and especially what you're about to learn about what the right leg does. You can worry a little bit less about that right leg alignment, but let's just start 25 to 30 degrees turned out from both the left and right foot. Then we work up towards the knees, and we want the knees to be angled slightly outwards. Again, golfers that go on ski trips tend to come back and they've got pizza feet, pizza knees pointing inwards. Again, it's a problematic point in the golf swing, something I can remember seeing from some of the old Michelle Wee swings where the knees would start to angle inwards. Again, just let's start to align this. The feet are turned out slightly, the knees are turned out slightly. And then as we look at this from the back view, we're going to create a lot of this forward bend by pushing the hips back. This starts to create some more forward bend in the hips, but this will make some of the movements we do later a lot easier. I want to get away from that myth that the hips are level to the ground. We're trying to avoid some of that because that will seriously restrict what the knees can do and what the hips can do easily in that backswing. So we've got the hip pushed back, we've got the knees slightly flexed, and I would say aim for about 20-degree knee flex in that right leg. I'd say if I looked at professionals, I'd typically see more knee flex than less knee flex, but 20, pushing to 30 degrees of knee flex is okay. So now we've got the basis, feet turned out, knees turned out, forward bend created from the hips. That lower body set to do a lot of what we're trying to achieve throughout this golf swing. So if we look at some of the key points that we're trying to achieve with the hips, well, the pelvis or the belt buckle is pointing down. As we swing back, that pelvis is not going to remain completely flexed. It's actually going to start to extend some. The knee flex is going to change. We're not going to keep that knee flex completely the same. And in doing so, the hips are going to turn to around 45 degrees or maybe even a slight bit more if we're trying to create a bit more power. And the next part to get through, which is somewhat of a myth in golf that you should keep the hips level, well, we're not. We're going to allow that left hip to get a little bit lower and the right hip to get a little bit higher. This makes it so much easier for us to get the shoulder tilt, which we want to keep a more stable golf swing to allow us to make good contact like the professional golfers. So now that we know that the goal is to get a slightly extended pelvis, the right hip to be a little bit higher than the left hip, and we're trying to get some hip turn to create power, let's have a look at the process of doing that. So when we go into our address position and we start to take the hands in, as we do that, this knee flex is going to start to change. The left knee will bend and the right leg will straighten. Now, the first thing that I see that many golfers do wrong is they bend the left knee more than they straighten the right leg. So if you were to bend the left knee 10 degrees, but you did nothing to the right leg, you'd start to see your backside comes away from this wall, imaginary wall, and you start to move your weight too much into the toes and the head goes towards the target. This could be a very easy way for you to start shanking the ball and miss hitting it. We don't want to do that. So we're going to try and balance out that the right leg straightens as much as the left leg bends. Now, one of the things that was very fashionable many years ago was to try and keep that right knee bent and coil into that right leg. Now, I'm going to advise you strongly to avoid that because it gives you a higher risk of getting a lower back injury. If you're going to restrict the right leg, then the turning's got to come from somewhere, and if you're trying to get your lumbar to do that, you may find that you become more prone to L4, L5, lower back, lumbar injuries, and we want to avoid that, really we do. We're not trying to build a golf swing that hits it far at the expense of our body being written out of playing golf into our later years. So we want to build a golf swing that allows us to play golf for a long time. And so the ability to bend the left knee and straighten the right leg to facilitate the hip turn is really important, because in doing so, we're reducing some of the risk to our lower back. So the left knee is bending, the right leg straightening, and we're starting to turn the hips. The left knee is bending as much as the right leg is straightening to make sure that the pelvis doesn't start to move towards or away from the ball. And as we find that the left knee bends and the right leg straightens, that's starting to tilt the hips. It's not spoke about much in golf. And if I were to take a golf club and place it in towards where my belt buckle would be, as I turn, I'm trying to achieve around 45-degree hip turn. Now, this is going to be achieved differently for different people. Golfers are built differently. We all accept that. You may get somebody with limited hip mobility. We may get somebody with a previous knee injury. Whatever it may be, wherever you may be, we're trying to achieve hip turn in a way that allows us to take the golf club to the top of the golf swing with around 90 degrees shoulder turn with minimal risk to the body while we do that. Now, some golfers, typically older golfers, find that they will need to bend the left knee and straighten the right leg more to achieve 45-degree hip turn. If you're not capable of 45-degree hip turn, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. There are ways around it. The way your body allows, we want to try and achieve 45-degree hip turn, and that left knee bending, the right leg straightening will allow it. Now, some female golfers or very flexible golfers will tend to create around 40 to 45-degree hip turn with very minimum knee flex change. They've got very good hip rotation and very flexible. Now, I still wouldn't advise this as the best way to do it, but they're able to create enough turn in the backswing with minimal knee flex change. So you will see some golfers out there that manage to keep a lot of flex in their knees and still achieve that top of the backswing position. But I would say to reduce the risk of injury, why don't we distribute that load amongst the body more equally than overloading the amount that we do from just the hip rotation? So why don't we let the left knee bend? Why don't we let the right leg straighten somewhat to facilitate this hip turn? And if you're a golfer with minimum flexibility and you need to lock out that right leg, so be it, as long as we weigh up the ability to create power and see how that would impact our low point a little bit further down in the golf swing. But if you need to straighten that right leg to create a bigger arc, I'm not totally against that. So left knee bends, the right leg straightens, the right hip will start to go back, and if we do this equally, we'll be able to keep the backside up against the wall. And as the hands go in, we'll start to see some form of daylight between the legs. Now, if you're looking from the front view and you start to see that your weight is shifting into this trail leg, it's going to restrict the ability to hit the ball first, ground second. So I would say while you're doing this, you're trying to get a feeling that your weight is maintained in a very similar position to where it was at address. We're not trying to load our weight onto that trail leg. Now in moving 2 to 3 inches back, if they're trying to achieve 3 to 4 inches of hip sway in the downswing, they've now got to move 7 inches in that downswing. It's a really tricky move to time, and I find that most golfers trying to achieve a more forward hip position towards the targeted impact find it a lot easier if they're not moving back. Now, some of the common problems I see in an effort to try and keep their weight somewhat stable, they start to find that their hips move towards the target. This would be when the hips actually have swayed towards the target and the pelvis remains too flexed. So I did mention that even in this backswing, we will have a feeling that the hip starts to extend somewhat and the belt buckle starts to raise, and that'll reduce the risk of us moving the hips towards the target in the backswing. Golfers that do tend to push their hips too far towards sometimes find it very difficult to start that downswing. So we'll manage this, and you could do this quite easily by drawing a line from the trail leg to the head. And when we swing back, we're not looking for the head to move behind that line. And if we put a line on the lead hip, we're not looking for that hip to move forward. So generally, your hips in this backswing are going to stay somewhat between those lines, and it's a really easy way for you to work on that. One of the big drills I've got for the backswing to get a feel of the knee flex change, put the golf club on the ground, take your right hand by the side of the golf club, and just start to pull your arm behind you. Feel how much you need to use the hips, knee, left knee flexes, the right leg straightens to get to about 80-degree shoulder turn. Now, as you're looking on the video, if you start to see your weight shift too far to the front, or you start to see that you shift your head back and you move your weight back, then keep training this until you find the way that you can keep that hip centered and still achieve that 80-degree shoulder turn. Use the knees, hips, and shoulders equally to do this. Now, when you're practicing, you can get an alignment stick and rest it against a wall behind you, or stick it in the ground. And then again, it's a great way for you to look on video when you check your golf swing to check if your hips have moved away from that line, too far forward of that line, or if you're doing pretty well and you're managing to keep your hips against that line in the golf swing. Hopefully, guys, you've got a better understanding of how your hips work in that backswing. If you've learned something from this video, please share with me what you've learned. I'd like to read the comments, and I do enjoy replying. There's not enough comments on my videos just yet. Like the video, it does help the algorithms for me. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do, especially as part 2 is going to come out shortly. Thanks very much, guys, and see you all soon.